Behind the Shades.
Hello, Isaac. How are you doing today?
And how are you?
I am well. As we discussed, it's a beautiful, beautiful Saturday. So we can't wait to get outside and enjoy the weather after all of the doomsday news and the apocalypse and the end of times for those who are in New York and Canada recently, right?
Yes, yes, yes. It's been a week. How about that? It's been a week.
Absolutely. So I know we're going to talk about a very important topic, and this topic is going to be parenting, and we're going to get a father's perspective. So I'm very happy to have you speak about that and join us on the show today. So before we get officially started, Isaac, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are and where my guests can find you.
Yes, I am Isaac Murden. First of all, I want to say thank you for having me today. First of all, I can be located on YouTube on the Isaac Murden Network. And if you guys have Podbean, you can reach me at imurd96.podbean.com. That is my podcast called The Den. It's stories for the soul. So first of all, I'm a father of four. I'm currently from Washington, D.C. Um, I work for a medical hospital here in New York City. And what I do, I'm a clinician and I oversee a rehab unit in New York. And what we do is we try to guide and help individuals that suffer from alcohol and substance abuse, violence prevention, back into the community, transitioning back into different rehab programs, outpatient treatment programs, housing programs, long-term treatment facilities, and everything else that's associated with getting men and women back to society so they can be productive members of society. So that's just a little piece of what I do.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. It sounds like you have quite the what's the word I want to look for? It's like you have quite the food on your plate, as they would say, right? Like you're helping so many other people in this life. So how did you get into that?
Well, actually, me personally, I'm a recovering addict myself, and it was something that just fell into my lap once I moved here to New York. And I started off in mental health. I did mental health for about 4 or 5 years, and then I started working at a level 2 facility for children called Lincoln Hall. I'm currently an administrator there. I'm still working there part time on the weekends. And then from there, I got into substance abuse, which was very rewarding because for one, I can relate to it, and for two, it was challenging. And I've been doing that now almost 25 years also. So yes, my plate is pretty full, with the work and then being a full-time dad and a full-time husband, as you know. It just doesn't stop. But you know what? I never complain and I'm loving every minute of it.
Working with those who are recovering from addiction and things of that nature, you must come across many parents who are trying to bounce back and make sure they're clean or at least in a position to continue to be the parent that they would always wanted to be. Have you come across that type of scenario as well?
I come across those types of scenarios every day. 80% of our population is men, and 75% of the population that are men, they are fathers, and due to addiction has taken them away from their fatherly responsibilities. And you know um when you're talking about addiction and dealing with addiction, it's either one or the other. It's either your addiction or trying to be a parent, productive citizen in society, husband, boyfriend, partner, whatever the case may be. And many times they choose their addiction. So what happens is many of these fathers are out of the homes, out of their kids' life. And one of the things that come up a lot of times in our group sessions is fathering. They talk about how much they've been out of their kids' life, and many of them talked about how their kids has turned out to be just like them.
I know when I speak to a few people who are recovering from addiction, they tell me a story, and sometimes it's painful to hear that you don't beat it, meaning that you don't ever get rid of it. It's something that you have to continue to walk that path and walk that journey to remain away from the addiction. Is that accurate to say?
It is very accurate. Addiction is a lifelong process. It's an everyday process. For some individuals, it's an hourly process, and it's a minute process, depending on where you are in your addiction. One thing I express when I talk to my guys, I say, the longer that you're clean, the harder you have to fight, because you're only a one decision away. It's only one decision, and that one decision can ruin the rest of your life, because addiction is mean. It has no friends. It has no love for you. The ultimate goal for addiction is to dominate, persecute, and you know, last but not least, kill you.
That must be a tough path to walk, not only for yourself because you're recovering from it, but you're also helping others because there's probably people out there who are thinking, I can't ever be in a position where I would choose something else over my children. But you don't know what that person is going through because that's how strong that addiction and that scenario is. What are some of the ways that maybe someone like me who doesn't maybe suffer from an addiction can understand and be a resource to those who are recovering from addiction and trying to be the best father or mother that they want to be?
You could keep it really simple. Just use your life experiences. Talk about some of your personal struggles, because just because you're not a victim of addiction, you most definitely can teach somebody how to live life on tie life terms, and really that's where it starts. Most of our men, that are suffering from addiction, they also have childhood trauma. They suffer from different, not just childhood trauma, but different types of trauma. They've been physically and emotionally abused. Some has been sexually abused. And so, as men, we're very prideful. So it's like, I'm not going to talk about that. So what happens is that they stuff it and it sits in the pit of their belly, and they don't have the self-confidence and they don't trust. So what happens, a lot of them turn to the disease of addiction just to try to deal with the excess of trauma that they go through. And that's just one level of it.
What are some of the other ways that fathers, particularly, are trying to fight against when it comes to the issues and maybe some of the stigma of raising good children as a father?
When it comes to addiction and fatherhood and the stigmas that come along with being a good fatherhood in that same realm, you can't worry about the stigmas. The one thing I always say, it takes work, and it takes vulnerability, and it takes resources, and having a network, and having people in your life that you know what you can pick up the phone, and that you can call and you can talk to, and you can express to whoever is in your network what's going on, how you feeling, and you can get some comparable, if some suggestions, and some tough love, because it is not easy. Being a father myself of four, my first three kids, due to my addiction, I wasn't in their life. So, I tell people all the time, the Lord gave me one more chance. I have a 22-year-old at home. And when he was born, the one thing that I knew that I hadn't acquired was the skills to be a father. So, I just asked the Lord to give me the strength and allow me to let this little boy, this brand new baby into the world, teach me how to be a father. And I worked on it. And in that process, working on trying to rebuild relationships that were torn because of your addiction, because of your absence, it takes work. And sometimes you don't have to go through that pain and that misery. You're gonna have to look at it in the face, and you're gonna have to deal with it the way that it is.
There's a saying out there that I always love, and I shared with a number of men out there where your struggles in your life will help you to be a better person. But the family that
That's so
you
true.
create, absolutely, but the family that you create will help you to be a better man. How
And
true is that for you?
well, for me, most definitely. Just going through those trials and tribulations of just reintroducing myself to the world, outside of my addiction, is one thing, but just learning how to be a father and trying to be the best father that I possibly can. Once again, I'm gonna say it's been work, and it's nonstop. It never stops. It's always something to learn, and sometimes your past creeps up in certain situations where you're gonna have to look at it sometime. And just like I say, the more work and the longer you do, the easier it becomes. Then you have acquired the skills to have those tough conversations with your kids, and you can be honest with them and tell them why you were the person that you were, and that wasn't you. And the person that you are now is the person that you want to continue to become.
What are some of the things that you learned as a father that you'd like to share with us?
There's no manual out there how to be a parent, especially being a father. And as you talked about earlier, there's so many stigmas. You got the absent father. You have the father that's there, but that's not there, and then you have the father that's there that also struggles with his own personal demons. So, for me, one of the lessons that I learned at being a father is learn from the situations that are around you. You know what I'm saying? You got to let your ego go as a dad. And sometimes, you can't be one way or another. It's a life balancing act, especially with your kids. Being able to, I had to learn how to listen to understand my kids, because sometimes, as parents, we feel as though like we know everything. And one thing I tell my kids, even my youngest boy, I said, look, I'm not no better than you. I've made many mistakes, but I've lived longer than you have to teach you the mistakes that I've made so you won't make them. So I had to go through that process, which was, it had its ups and its downs, but eventually it smoothed right out.
Was that a difficult journey for you to say that, hey, I may not know everything, but I have the experience, and now you're going from maybe telling it to more of a listening type of role?
Due to the type of work that I do presently, it made it really, really easy, because I was, going to work every day and doing the work that you do. What happens is that you see yourself through the clients that you service, and you begin to hear and you begin to see some things, and it really humbles you. So in the beginning it was very tough. That process was very, very tough. But as time went on and the years went on, and I became better as a person, not so much as a father, just as a person, fatherhood, got much, much easier. Those conversations got easier.
You mentioned earlier on that 80% of the people that are in the population of where you work with, they're men, and
Yes.
75% of that are fathers. That sounds like a large amount. And I know sometimes we seem to forget that the resources allocated to men and to women are different. The
Yes.
resources allocated to mothers and fathers are different. And how are some of the ways that maybe as a society that we can make sure that we're always showing up for the fathers out there who need continuous help?
First of all, we got to get to a place where we can't continue to look down on our suffering addicts, because addiction is just like, smoking marijuana and all those other things. You have a high level of addicts that are addicted to pain medications. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like, the addiction is very, very widespread, and we have to embrace the disease again, because it's right in our face, it's right in our back doors, and it's something that we can't continue to kind of look away and think that it's going to go away. We have to continue to provide federal money and viable resources, not just residential treatment, outpatient services, mentoring services. We have to provide job opportunities, vocational educational opportunities, and they have to be affordable, because one of the stigmas about recovery is that many of our men, they come in, they have no viable skills at all. So getting them into a place where, we can get them back into vocational training schools and teaching them how to read and write and teaching them how to communicate properly. Those are essential tools that we all need in order to be successful citizens in society.
Does that mean that sometimes those who aren't a part of the addiction community is to a degree not as understanding and as compassionate as maybe those who are in the addiction community would need them to be?
Well, sometimes it goes both ways. You have a certain percentage of individuals that's not in that community. They aren't compassion because they don't look at the world the same way we look at the world. And then you have people that's in that community that understands that addiction, but they're all, the stigma is, when you're going to get it right, when you're going to get your life together, why you keep doing what you're doing. So it's a mixed bag, as far as that question is concerned, because the stigma is most definitely there. It's most definitely there, and it's not going to go nowhere. And you have to also remember, there's a certain percentage of individuals that hide their disease, and they continue to get up and go to work and be productive and still take care of their personal responsibilities. But that don't mean they still don't suffer from the disease of addiction.
I believe that's an amazing point, Isaac, that you shared, because when I knew very little of addiction outside of what you read and that it's bad, right? And you feel bad for what people are going through. But then when someone starts to recover, I knew nothing about that until I started to speak to people who were recovering. And they would tell me, they would say, Train, you know what? What I always wanted was just someone to understand that it's not an easy journey. They don't have to throw money at me. They don't have to throw me a, like what they call, quote unquote, a pity party. I just want them to look at me like a regular person instead of someone that should be discarded. When you're working with your clients and at your job, do you get that vibe where some people feel like they're less than in comparison to others?
Yeah, it's a very lonely place, man, because to be honest with you, a lot of our, men in the community, we have a lot of them, it's not their first go round. Many of them been in 10, 12, 15, 20, 25, 30 different rehab facilities. And they've been doing this for years, and the struggle to get it right. However, but the stigma of, my family just want me to get it right, and everybody that they associated with are like them. So, it's a comfort and it's a discomfort because it's like, what I'm gonna do when I get clean? It's like divorcing your best friend, or you know what I'm saying? And trying to find a new friend and have no idea of which way you want to go.
Who can help provide that type of guidance that they would need to direct them, especially for the fathers who are recovering, because fathers play such an integral part of the child raising in the family.
Look, we have fathers groups, they have NAAA groups, they have multiple social groups, all over the country. Um, it's a variety of different outlets that individuals that can go to. Even social media is really, they have rooms now in social medias just for fathers. You know what I'm saying? For struggling fathers. They have discords for fathers that are struggling just being a father, not just with addiction. So um with social media, it has opened up the doors and opened up endless possibilities for fathers to really reach out and get the necessary help that they need. And the most important thing about that is that they want to have the help. You got to want it. Everybody don't want it. And that's unfortunately part of disease. Some people are comfortable in that misery and in that pain, and then you have a large population of that. They suffer in the disease of addiction, trying to get it right every day.
When the fathers are recovering and they're on their journey back to being a part of the family that they spent some time away from, how is that transition back into the family units and them being a part of their kid's life again, or their wife or their girlfriend? Like, how is that journey for them?
Sometimes that journey is difficult because sometimes their family don't want them back in their life. They've burnt so many bridges. You know what I'm saying? They made so many false promises and false hopes to their family, and they've been doing it for so long. Some of them don't have family to go to. Some of them, their family learn to live or learn to live and love them from a distance. It's a very, very difficult process because, they may get 6 months, 8 months clean, then they go back out. They may get a year clean, as an event may happen, something may come up, something may happen. They go out and, they go out and use. And every time you go out, it becomes much and much more difficult to come back. So that journey of getting back with their families, building relationship with their kids, their ex-wives, a lot of them lose families. I mean, when I tell you they lose everything, they lose their families, their wives, their kids, their homes. Like it's a devastating loss when you're dealing with the disease of addiction.
I know for you, you shared that you have four beautiful children. Um, and you mentioned that three of them you were when you were recovering from your addiction. It was during the time of the first three. From what you tell me, you're able to make it work and to continue forward to be the father to these children that you always wanted to be. How are you able to reach that point in your journey, Isaac?
Well, my middle son, that relationship is still a struggle, um, because he felt like that I left him, and honestly, being I did leave him. My other kids, um, it was more or less me just being consistent and just making my word mean something and just wanting to be in their life and having the tough conversations. Once again, you have to be vulnerable and have those conversations. It's not about really getting your kids to understand your disease, but getting to a point where you become consistent as a father, having those conversations, being able to learn from your kids, being able to listen from your kids, and giving them the safe space to be able to come to you and feel like they can trust you again. And that's a very tough process for a lot of men because in the disease of our addiction and fatherhood, like we burn a lot of bridges. We burn a lot of bridges, and as human beings, a lot of times people, they don't want to forgive and they don't want to forget.
How can we, as fathers, make that an easier road to walk? Because communication and consistency is so key when it comes to the family unit.
I think we need to have more outlets like this. We need to have more discords where we can come together and be vulnerable and talk about some of the the real issues, because like I said earlier, it runs deep, and a lot of men have a lot of issues that they haven't dealt with internally. It's a lot of things that you go through in the process of your addiction that sometimes you're fearful about talking about. You've done some things that you're not proud of, that you feel like you can never tell nobody. And we need discourse like this. We need organizations that most definitely focus on really getting fathers back into the community and getting fathers together where they can really talk about these issues and get the necessary feedback and the help that they need from other fathers that have had the same experiences, because addiction takes you into some places where people so ashamed to even talk about, they won't even tell nobody some of the things that they have done.
I know in my experience, helping men and women, I always found that men in general were less likely to reach out, even though they're suffering, for assistance. And I think there's many men out there, fathers especially, that are suffering in silence. They may not know how to navigate their fatherhood journey. They may not know how to be the type of dad to their children that they always wanted for themselves. And when you mentioned the childhood, do you see fathers maybe unknowingly repeating some of the things that their parents did that they didn't like to their children?
Many of the fathers that I've come in contact with, when they talk about their dad and they share their experiences of what it was like being home and being around their father, or having a fatherless home. How about that? Growing up in a home where their father wasn't there, then later on down the line, they find out that their father was an addict, was always a recurring addict, or whatever the case may be. And then years later, when they sit down and really process that information as an adult, with suffering from the disease of addiction, they realize they are just like their father. So that's a whole different kind of conversation. That's a whole nother traumatic experience, because it's like, wow, man, I turned out to be just like the man I dislike.
And that could be
So
devastating for them, right?
yes, it could be, it's devastating for many men, because what happens is in that process, they have kids, right? So, they kids grow up not really, they may know their father, but they don't know their father. And then a lot of the stories you hear, my son's in the streets, my son is in jail. Um, you know, it's an ongoing process. And I remember I'm share a story with you guys, man. When I first started working in the field, um, I was working in a correctional facility, and I remember, man, I had a grandfather, I had father, I had two sons, and I had a nephew all in the same unit. And I was like, and I was early in this transition, getting into this field, and I couldn't understand, like, it's five generations of you guys incarcerated right now. Why? And now I know why. Because, addiction runs generations sometimes. It runs a generational curse that's everlasting if someone doesn't, make a decision to kind of change that trajectory.
And for some people, that might be difficult because you are looking to change something that you've known your entire life. Like, how difficult would that journey be for those, Isaac?
It's very difficult. It's really people talk about mind over matter, but it goes a little deeper than that, because first of all, you know, beating the getting through the process of just being clean, that's just the first step. That's really that you know that's just the you just breaking the iceberg with just struggling with the fact that, what, I'm not using. Now you got to look in the mirror, and then you got to deal with all the, the internal trauma that you may have, that you've been kind of putting away for years. And you talking about years of trauma. You talking about years of disheartenment. You talk about years of frustration. Um, you're talking about years of men just, struggling to be in and out of great relationships and building healthy relationships. It's, trauma attracts trauma. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of men don't even know what it's like to even be in a healthy relationship, unlike a long-term relationship. Having kids by multiple women that's suffering from their own trauma. So it becomes an ongoing cycle. So you really gotta dig deep, man. And you gotta get you a counselor, you gotta get you a therapist, you gotta get you a network. Like, you have to have a variety of different groups of individuals that's around you, that's in your ear, that's gonna give you some tough love, that's gonna and guess what? You have to be willing to, because sometimes that tough love don't always feel good.
And as we're looking to close today, what are some of the tips that the men who are coming up, the young fathers out there, the potential fathers, what are some of the ways that we can ensure that we avoid those situations that may influence or impact us in our parenting journey?
Well, one of the things, what I do, and even with my son, you got to get back, you got to go back into the communities, and you got to try to reach out, and you got to, talk to some of these young men. Just like I say, I'm at a level 2 facility. I see these kids, they coming in at 13, 14, and 15, and it gives me a great opportunity to sit down and have conversations with these kids, and just try to get them to a place where they can trust somebody and have some self-confidence within themselves, to really believe that, what, after this, I can have a life outside of just being in the streets. And you got to give back, you got to reach back. And even sometimes that's tough because it's like, you know a lot of our kids today, they think they know everything. So that's a whole nother podcast right there. You know what I'm saying? But you have to reach back. You have to go out and search for your community groups. Once again, you got your NA and AA groups where you can go and you raise your hand, man, and all you got to do is say it. Whatever it is, trust me, it's somebody in that group that can relate and most definitely can pull you in and help get you on the track that you need to be on. But one thing is you have to be willing. You have to be willing. You got to go through the trials and the tribulations to get the way you need to be.